Hey there, what is up, everyone? It's Odin here. It's Sunday. You know what that means. You know what that means. It means I'm going to make a little video, talk about what's up, what's going on. I'll talk a little bit about moms. This is Mother's Day, of course. So happy Mother's Day to all of you awesome mothers out there. Vitally important. I made a video about fathers and I talked about the vitally important role fathers play in the lives of children, and definitely no different for moms. Vitally important, the role of mothers for children. I'll talk a little bit about that, as well as what we got going on and what kind of week it's been, all that good shit. So first off, we'll start off with what I'm working on right now. It's been slow going because I've had a few other things to work on, but this is the same shove page, volume 2 that I was working on last week. It was just pencils. But it's the intro to a story in volume 2. I still have not come up with the title for this story. I have a few ideas floating around, but should be fun. I'm looking forward to just making new shit, you know. So there's that. There's also Kill Them Dead. Showed the image. We'll show it again. The Kill Them Dead image that I did. And then there's some great artwork being done by Demina and Skunk Artworks as well. There's a colored version of this that James actually colored that was floating around. And at that, I also did pencils for a page. You can't see it very well, but this is the follow-up page to the one I'm working on. So yeah, it's kind of what's going on. And then I've been doing a lot of this to prep for the black and white version of the book. Something it almost became an afterthought, and then I'm like, oh shit, I got to make sure that gets done. It's blacking in the gutters on certain areas. So the gutters were not originally black on this. It was white. But when I gave it to Demir, there's too many names that sound the same in our world. When I gave it to Demir to color, there were certain times he's like, can I color these gutters black? I'm like, well, let me see it. And he would show me. I'm like, oh yeah, that looks great. And it would be like, it would fit the story narrative, like to do black gutters in this part. And then after a while I was like, oh, the black and white should have those black gutters too, especially because it did add more. So I've been burning through a lot of ink to make these match, not only for the black and white version, but just also if there were some purchases of the original art tier, and if they choose a page that they see it in the book as having black and white or black gutters, and then they get the original and it doesn't, they might be disappointed. I don't know that kind of stuff, but just in case. So there's about, like, especially on the second story, there was a lot. Like, he just was like, oh, this all needs black gutters. And I was like, I can't argue with it. I've always liked black gutters, but oftentimes I wouldn't do it on pages because, I don't know, laziness maybe. Well, it also just kind of like to see what it looks like, and then I was very happy that he would show me with the first right of refusal, like, no, go back to the white gutters or whatever. So and I don't know that there's a page with just pure white gutters. They all match the color scheme of each page if they're not fully black. So anyway, a lot of them do have black gutters, and a lot of those were not black when I did the first drawing on the board. So going in and changing that. So that takes a lot of time. I mean, it's tedious work. It's kind of the stuff they give, like, up and coming artists and inkers, like, hey, just put in some black. That's what you got to do. So. But even though it's tedious, it's kind of cathartic, I just like doing it. I I like watching ink flow out of a brush. There's something about that. So that's what's going on. Yeah, Unconditional Chef Volume 2. I'm working on it. Lots and lots to work on with it. And then really what's focused a lot of our attention, because James and I have been writing it, and it's been an absolute blast writing with James, is Kill Them Dead. Link is in the description. It's going to be a rock opera, as it were, which means there will be a soundtrack, and it's not even a soundtrack. It's so intertwined with the story. It's more like a musical almost. So that's why it's a rock opera comic book, and a lot of big ideas about how that's going to be. There's going to be several tiers, but the one that's going to be like the most coveted, I would say, and certainly the most expensive, but it's going to have it's going to be quite an experience, and that's the one I'm excited to make. And we're working with different printers and different people to make sure that we can do it the way we want to do it, which is no small task when it comes down to it. So anyway, yeah, that's what's going on with Kill Them Dead. Magnificent Bastards. People in the U.S., you should be getting those soon, but James sent out the bulk of the orders are going to the U.S., and he sent them over the border from Canada. They were coming to me to fulfill. I mean, he has it all laid out for me. It should be pretty foolproof, but on the same hand, it's been a huge nightmare, and we're going to have to rethink some things for the future. So we thought this would be a great plan, but they're held up in customs. They have been. The original ETA tracking that we got from Canada Post was that it would deliver on Wednesday. Here it is Sunday. And then when I started tracking it through USPS, they said Thursday. Here it is Sunday. And the last update I got is still the same. It's in customs. So I don't know. They assume like we're smuggling heroin or what the fuck they're thinking, but it's held up. And, just as soon as I get it, I'm all over getting the shit out. But can't do anything till I get those books, and I hope they don't fuck with it and get all stupid about it. Just want to get them and get them shipped out. That's all I want. So anyway, it's extremely frustrating for James and I. And we've talked about this, and it's just a thing with life that if everything went smoothly, you want things to go smoothly. I guess the idea is you expect things to go smoothly, but you prepare for things not to. That should be the lesson. But I also was telling James, it's like everything that can go wrong will go wrong. The Murphy's Law of doing something for the first time. There's so many learning opportunities, but there's also the having to force through and go through the fire, as it were, to get to the other side makes the experience that much more worth it, I guess. I mean, there's a term I was looking for, but it's eluding me. But you have to go through that to get to the other side, to really value what you're actually doing. And what are we doing? We're making comic books, which to some people is a small thing. To people who know, anybody who's actually worked on them, I mean, I can talk about all of the reasons, and anybody who's put together a book and from beginning to end knows all the reasons why it's so fulfilling. But especially if you're doing art, I can't stress it enough, like how much time, especially when you're really pouring yourself into it. it's not just a job. How much time and energy and thought and care that you try to put into this stuff. Because with Shove Volume 1, I did 82 pages of story, and then 6 pages of Cole's story. 88 pages. It took a lot of fucking time. And then I know also the trajectory of skill, of just time doing it, and I feel like the growth between those 88 pages, I'm like, that's why I'm so excited for Shove 2, because I'm like, this is a whole nother level, because I've already gone through it once. And that was one of the biggest things with Shove for me, was just get it done, man. Just do it. Just make a book. Let it fall. Let it be received how it will, but at least you will have done it. Which I think for me, especially because I've been kind of wanting to my whole life, I think that just having done it is more important than having it land and be like, somebody's favorite friggin' book of all time, or something. Now, if that ever happens, that's a huge bonus, but I still feel that will come here soon, I'm like, as I grow and learn, but like, I'm like, get it done. I remember that was the same thing with like my first band, Angels of the Odd, but how accomplished of a feeling it was. One, the first time we went on stage, performed the songs that we'd been rehearsing and practicing and writing, performed them in front of an audience that would judge the shit out of you, and you have to go up there with so much bravado and confidence, just like it was always my saying, like, act like you've been there before, even if you hadn't. And so even that first one, I got a lot of pretty good reviews, because they were like, oh yeah, it was your first show? I'm like, yeah, I'd never been on a stage before. I'd done like karaoke and stuff, but way different. But the reality is, you're going into a place where people are enjoying themselves, having drinks, getting away from the kind of hellish realities of life to just enjoy themselves. And what are you going to do? You're going to sonically take over almost every inch of airspace in that place and force feed these people what you've been working on, hoping that they will like it, hoping that the thing that you like so much and you've been working so hard on is received very well. Those experiences are extremely humbling, but you have to go in with a certain level of confidence and belief in yourself. Now, I will say, and I surely see this in comic books, indie comic books especially, but definitely in the music scene, there was plenty of people who had full belief in themselves, but should never have donned a stage. They were not only amateur, they were below amateur. It was almost like a bad joke, and you go, well, they'll either get it, and some of those guys are persistent, and I will give them that. If I don't think their music, if I think their music sucked, I think their performance sucked, I think their look sucked, I think everything about them sucked, but they were persistent, I can at least give them that. But if they weren't persistent, I can also say, like, well, at least you learned, and go find something that maybe you're more have a proclivity and an aptitude for. But I think sometimes people want to put the cart before the horse, and that happens in everything. But sometimes just the doing it, there's certain things you can only learn by throwing yourself into the fire. So it's kind of like when you're getting trained at a job and they're like, hey, here's how you do this, and they walk you through and step by step, and you take notes, and you feel as confident as you can, and they're like, all right, now you do it. You're not, rarely, there's times where somebody's just a fucking a phenom or something, but most of the time you're gonna stumble through it and have to like look at your notes or ask questions, and if you're training somebody, these things, but you also get a sense for somebody who has an aptitude for things, and you can be pleasantly surprised by their own ingenuity, but you also have to like kind of watch, make sure they don't fuck anything up, because sometimes people are just so eager. I'm a pretty cautious person when it comes to like new things, and so I definitely dip my toe in to check the temperature first, where other people are head first no matter what. You're like, that wasn't water, that was it wasn't H2O, it was H2SO4, you dumb. You just dove in head first. But because of that, it's held me back sometimes, but it's also the main reason I do it is so that when I finally go forward 100%, I can look good doing it, I guess. Generally speaking, if you've got that opportunity, you don't always have that. A lot of times you have to look like an idiot and just go through that. And I've worked plenty of pretty laborious physical jobs, but they also had a certain amount of aptitude attached to them where if you fuck something up, it could have very costly results. Not only costly financially, but costly safety-wise, which you have to be really careful there, especially with heavy machines and things like that, moving parts. Not only costly safety-wise, but yeah, costly man hours, costly everything. So, anyway, that was just a rambling thought on new experiences or diving right in. But that said, all I want is the continual growth arc. I don't want it to parabola. I want a continual arc. As I'll say with, recently came out, everybody's fucking talking about it, and it's actually happened a few times before. I'm like, I've been saying this for 10, 15 years. But Frank Miller had a Wolverine cover recently, and it looked like dog shit. And you can see Frank Miller in it, but, you wonder if he's got Alzheimer's or something. Or like, what the hell's going on? Like, why the guy who made Dark Knight and why the guy who made Sin City is some of the most iconic comic book art images ever is now being ridiculed. And my thought is, I'm like, I don't know if he's trolling. Maybe he's just like, basically like, man, I could fucking shit on a piece of paper and people think it's art. I've got to that level, so that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Could be, who knows? It could be, like I said, he's got dementia or Alzheimer's, he just can't draw anymore, or he just lost it. Who the fuck knows? But that said, his drawing, his art has taken this parabolic nosedive, and where he had this like meteoric rise in ability, and like Sin City, like right at that pinnacle. But it's been a while now that every time I saw something, I'm like, that's Frank Miller? Are you fucking shitting me? That's not Frank Miller. Yeah, not my Frank Miller. But it's always been mainstream. So I'm like, is he trolling? I don't know. At the end of the day, who fucking knows? So anyway, talk about this really for a bit. It is Mother's Day. A day we celebrate the mothers in our lives. And just in general, what motherhood means to everyone's life, because everybody has a mom. Whether she was a good mom or not, that's, well, for one, it's entirely subjective, but it's also, I mean, there are some objective things you could say. But you only have one. Well, some people have two or more. Like if you get adopted or something, you have more than one. But But nonetheless, and I think I made a video about fathers, and again the vitally important role that fathers play. It was pretty well received, and but father is something I've studied and I've lived, and now for 16 and a half years I've been again, just like I was talking about other things, you're like thrown into the fire. When you become a father, you study on it. You also know you had one, and you go, what they do good, what they do that you didn't like, what do you think you could do better? And you think about all those things, and you have a kid, and like all those grandiose father ideas that you have, they're totally not relevant to that moment where you're just changing diapers and waking up in the middle of the night and just holding this tiny thing that is so frail and incapable of taking care of itself. And so all those like fatherly teaching moments, those don't come until toddler age at the earliest. I mean, you can kind of get them at like 1 or something like that, where you're trying to teach them lessons, but it kind of falls on deaf ears, even though I think some of that does have some effect going forward. But anyway, what I'm getting at is like, I understand fatherhood, being that I'm a dude and I'm a father, and it's something I've thought about quite a bit. Motherhood, on the other hand, I don't fully understand in the same capacity. Now, one thing I always think about though with moms is that there's a connection that moms have to children that dads can never have, and it comes from incubation, the being pregnant, like where that person is actually a part of your body for 9 months. What you eat is given to that person. So like, I've been a smoker for a long time, and there's part of me is like, you should quit for your kid's sake and all that, and guarantee without question, if I was a woman and pregnant, I would have quit smoking. And I remember the girl's mom, she wasn't as big a smoker as me. Like, I like my cigarettes, I always have. But she smoked. And then when she got pregnant, instantly she just stopped, And then even in between kids, she would sometimes, partake. Like, she would just have like an evening cigarette or something like that. I always envied that, but like, I have an evening cigarette like 20 times a day, so. But because that baby and what you do to your own body, it has an effect. What you eat, what you put in, and even after that, especially if you nurse, what you eat goes directly to that child. And so there's a connection that a dad can never experience. And not that I necessarily want to, but for that tie, I find that very appealing or interesting. And then, there are things we could talk about as far as like, I guess, gender expectations of sorts, which makes moms so attached to children. Now, it is a different world now than it has been in the past. In the past, women were much more solely responsible for child raising, and fathers just were teachers and bread earners or providers. this day and age, there's lots of things to be said. For one, there's lots of single moms, which means you have to be everything, especially if you have a deadbeat dad in the picture, which is entirely unfair and entirely impressive when it happens. But it's unfair and it's impressive only because it's not the way it's supposed to be. Now, that said, I also believe that women are more adept at general child raising. In general. Like, I remember when my youngest, or my oldest, when she was a baby, like, having no clue what I was supposed to do half the time. And her mom had a very just second nature instinct on how to take care of this little human. And I followed her lead on that aspect of life because I don't exactly know, especially as a baby. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You change diapers, give it a bottle. But there was like so much instinctual, just natural instinct as to how to take care of this little human. And I was fascinated by that. I thought, that is incredible. And it's nature. Like, it's in your very being to have an understanding and proclivity. Well, there are some women who just suck at it. And I would hesitate to say most of the time, no, I wouldn't hesitate. Most of the time, I think that's just selfishness. Like, they're just a selfish person. That's why it's so hard for them to understand just the natural instincts. Say most of the time. And as we see the rise of the deadbeat dad, sorry, my dinner in my teeth. As we see the rise of the deadbeat dad, like I said, there was a time when dads were much less involved, but they weren't as often just abandoners. And I think that became a thing more often. And I remember working with guys who were like, they would talk about their kids like an inconvenience. They didn't have a relationship with them, but they would talk about how much it sucked to get the child support money taken out of their paycheck. And I remember, like, thinking to myself, how selfish do you fucking sound? Like, you're a fucking asshole. Like, you think it's that big of a convenience. You're not doing anything for your children's lives except for having money taken out of your bank account, out of your check. And you're mad about that. What a douchebag. So anyway, that is a real thing. But you don't see it with women as much. There's certainly been cases, but I'd say they are more isolated. Definitely the exception to the rule, where women have children and just abandon them and give them up. And sometimes I think that's not the worst thing. If they're the type of woman who would do that, probably better for the kid that you did. You know what I mean? Even though it's going to fuck with the kid. But hopefully in that case, they get raised by a better... But I do hear stories of orphanages back in the day. Some horror stories. That was a real thing. Like Annie, the movie, or the play. But it was like, that was a real thing. And like, as much as they kind of play it for laughs, like, some of those orphanages were hell for these kids, They showed zero love, So, anyway, shout out to the moms who do it right. I said my mom played the role of single mom. My dad was involved, but, I spent way more time with my mom, living with her. My sister, awesome, awesome mom. Cares very deeply for her kids. She had several and loved them and still loves them, obviously. Uh, I praise my daughter's mom, my ex-wife, for all the things of relationships that don't work or whatever. I am so glad that my daughters have a good mom. She is, there's things I disagree on, but when it comes down to it, I'm like, whatever. Like, if we were still married, I would say, hey, let's do this, let's not do this. But as it stands, I can trust her to raise the kids the best she thinks, even if I disagree. So I don't have to like trip on things and be like, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. I can just say. But the other thing is, we are in communication about a lot of things. We, even after divorce, we decided what age they could get piercings, what age they could have sleepovers, what age they could start dating. And then we revisited those things, and still revisit those things as time goes on. But it's like, we are still partnered in the decision making in a lot of ways. But on the day to day, it's all her when they're not with me. So, and I could have done a hell of a lot worse as far as having a good. So, definitely want to give kudos to her. And as I was thinking about this, when I was dating as a young man, I only dated one girl. I dated lots of girls before I got married, but like, I only dated one that had children when I was young, which makes sense. It's like less women have children back then. When you're in your younger years, it's just less likely. After I got divorced, every single woman I dated post-divorce. No, there was one that didn't have children. And that seemed weird at our age. That she didn't have, like, it was kind of weird to me. It was a conscious decision on her part, but there was some, like, a little off-putting in my mind. Even though some guys are like, I don't date a woman who has kids, I'm like, well, at this advanced stage of my life, like, that's not as much of an option. And also, seeing that I have kids, I want to see what kind of woman she is around kids, how did she raise her kids? And I will say, all the women I seriously dated at all were very, very good mothers as well. So a shout out to them, even though they're no longer in my life. Like, that was always a key, important thing. Because I remember the last woman I was with, we ended up getting engaged and all this stuff. But like, the first date we were on, it was a great, wonderful first date. Like, sparks flew instantly. It was really good. But I remember at a certain moment, her son called her, knowing she was on a date. Her son was like 16, 17 at the time. And she's like, I gotta take this. My son's call, and I'm like, no, absolutely. And I was really keenly paying attention to the conversation. And she had him on speaker, which I thought was interesting too. But I heard the whole interaction and was very impressed. Because basically he was calling because she had left him like some chicken and asparagus to make for dinner. Which right there, I was like, that's a healthy dinner. I like that, But he was asking her how to prepare the chicken, and he was kind of getting like pissy about it. He's like, what do I do? Like just being young dude kind of thing. But the banter was so close. Like, they were kind of like arguing with each other a little bit, but it was like the type of argument that comes from love, of like living with the person, being under the same roof like 90% of your life, and just been through like the push and pull of like raising a young man who's about to hit his young adult years. I found it super attractive. I'll say that. And I even commented on it afterwards. I'm like, I loved that interaction I just heard. Because I was, as a dad, and you're meeting women, you're like, is there attraction? You're just thinking about that. And at the moment when you're on a date, you're not fully thinking about your kids. It's kind of in the back of your head, kids. But you're focused on this date. But the reality is, you could be like 100% attracted to the person, but if you're like, I don't think you're a good mother figure, that would instantly be a hard no, Because if things get serious with us, you're going to be involved with my kid's life. Now, I will say, like, when we broke up, my kids were much more sad about it. They really liked her, and, that's one of those hard things, like, and it's a hard lesson for them as well as for everyone. I've already dealt with it a bunch because my mom got remarried after my dad and stuff like that. I'd already lived through that. My kids hadn't. And her kids had already been through that. So I got close to them, but like, they'd already seen their mom date because their dad and mom divorced a long time ago, and she had a few serious boyfriends before I came along. So her kids had already been through it. My kids had never really been through that because I'd never had anybody that was serious enough that I wanted my kids to be involved or get to know. But even that said, like, her little investment of time, those couple years that we were together, she was really good with my kids, and kind of her perspective and how she parented my kids during that time left a lasting impression on them. They still talk about it. So she's another mom that so throughout life, my mom passed away in 2013, January 5th. Some discrepancy on when she actually passed, but I believe it's the 5th. She had a hard life. And I remember my dad was not the best when they were married. He got much better after they divorced. He was abusive. And then my sister, she was hell on wheels for a lot of her young life, early teen life. And then my other brother and I'm 10 years younger than my sister, and I'm 12 years younger than my older brother. And then my other brother and me are 2 years apart. So there's like this bigger gap between the first two and the second two. And the first two are half brother and sister because, it's one of the things that they've always had to deal with. It's a horrible thing, but like, their dad is not my dad. Just one day up and left. Not a word, and never looked back. And my mom was left with her 2 kids at the time. And then her and my dad met. Their first child, who's my other brother, but I never met him because he died when he was just a few months old, was named after my dad. And was kind of funny. I wish he would have lived. But like, he had acute dwarfism. So all my brothers, we're all well over 6 foot. So my oldest brother, he's 6'2", I'm 6'4", and my other brother, he's 6'6". So I think it would have been the coolest if we had this one dwarf brother. But he passed on very early. So my mom had to deal with that. Plus, my dad was, like I said, very abusive. He was a very aggressive, intense person. And he changed quite a bit after they got divorced. But from what I gather, they got divorced when I was 3, so it wasn't like I remember some things, and they weren't always that good. But she went through that. And then after my older 2 siblings had grown and done their thing, my other brother and I, the ones that are 2 years apart, we were also hell on wheels, especially me. And I put her through a lot of emotional fucking stress just by my own decision making. At the time, not caring how it affect her, but as I look back, I'm like, as a parent, I can look back and go, ah, man, I hate that I put that kind of stress on my mom. Because I was always up to no good. I was always running with a bad crowd, always out doing things, dangerous things that would just kill a parent. Thinking about my kids doing some of the stuff I did is just almost scary. It's just, and I'm like, here I am, I lived through it, that's all good, but doesn't mean it was good. It doesn't mean I should have done that stuff, but I mean, I just found such an identity in being bad, There was a thrill to it. There was a certain level of respect I got from it, like getting in fights and weird stuff like that, and partying like a maniac. At that time, there is a certain respect to that. And unfortunately, even as you get older, there's still kind of like, I can drink way more than you. And it's like, why is that such a great thing? Why did that become like a cool thing? So, anyway, my mom went through all that, and I was the youngest. I was her baby. I had my own baby, but like, I was the baby of the family, and just put my mom through hell. Getting in trouble even as a young adult. Actually, it got worse as a young adult because I moved out as soon as I could get a GED, because that was the stipulation. I had to have a degree to move out, but I was able to get a GED very young and moved out right away, and all I did was run headfirst into traffic, proverbially. They just watched me, both my parents. Put my dad through the same stress, but he had much more of a he'll be fine kind of mindset, like, he'll figure it out. Whereas my mom was like hand-wringing and saddened by my decision making. But I mean, I straightened up after a while. And I remember that point. I remember taking my mom to dinner, and it was kind of like a rite of passage where I'm like, I'm taking you to dinner. You used to always like buy my food. I'm buying your food. And so I took her to dinner, and I'd gotten my life redirected, and there was a lot of spiritual things that really played a part in that. Like, God and my faith were huge in that moment of change. But anyway, it took her out, and I just laid it all out, how I apologized for putting her through that. All the times I was a shit. Because, I mean, I was a little fucking shit back then. And I really put her through it. And I was the last one, Like, once he's an adult, then I'm all done. And I did not make it easy. So it was an important thing for me to take her on that dinner and apologize, because I was, and I don't know if it's coming across now. I hope it is that to this day I feel bad about my whole life at that time in regards to how it affected her. Now again, it's my story. I wouldn't be who I am now without going through all that shit, but that was but she just had to be a spectator and worry, and I'm sure she worried hard about me, because I was just in so many fucked up dangers, and she doesn't even know the half of it. Like I told her a few things or some things I got caught, and the police are telling her what happened, but she doesn't even know the half of it. And I remember one time I wanted to tell her, and she's like, "Just don't." She's like, "I don't want to know." And I'm like, "All right, fair enough." But my relationship with my mom meant a lot to me. And being the baby, she'd already seen a bunch of shit. But there was a certain connection, I think, that we had in a certain way. You have a different connection with all your kids for whatever reason, wherever you really connect. I mean, obviously they're your kids, so you connect. But my relationship with her was probably quite different than my oldest brother, who's the firstborn. You know, and my sister, her and my mom were really close, really, really close. And when my mom passed, it hit my sister by far the hardest, because my mom was so entwined with her life, whereas I had moved out of state, but I know I can say this with absolute surety, it never stops being true, that there are certain moments in my life, now both my mom and dad have passed, so I don't have either. But I remember when my dad was still alive after my mom passed, and I could call him up, but I would be like, at this moment in my life, I just want to talk to mom. She's the one who will understand and listen in the right way. Dads have a certain perspective, and sometimes you're like, dad's the one I need to talk to right now, but then there's other times where you're like, I just want to talk to my mom. She's the person in my life that will get and say the things I need to hear. And like I said, that never stops. Those moments don't ever stop. There's plenty of recent ones where I'm like, there's only one person I want to talk to right now. But as the passing of time and as people pass on, you have to make peace with the reality. And just know, especially being a parent, that you're that for that time period when it comes calling as your kids get older and they go, for me, it would be, I just want to talk to dad, but I know my daughters will do the same thing. Like, I don't want to talk to dad right now. I want to talk to mom. It's like, it's just different situations. And I know there'll be times where they're like, Dad, this is a dad moment. I need to talk to dad. So, anyway. All that to say, mothers are, like I said, vitally important. The role of each parent, it can't be overstated. If you're a parent, just embrace your role. Relish it. Live in it. Because every day is one day further away from you losing that moment. I mean, it's just like the moments just go by, and if you don't have them, and I'm struggling with that right now, but just with the situation with my girls being in a different state now, but I'll be moving soon. But that you don't get those moments back, and time just keeps going. So in that moment, really embrace your role as a mom, as a father, and make as much impact as possible so that when your kids are your age, they'll look to that relationship and that upbringing and those moments of teaching and those moments of care and those moments of worry and heartbreak over your decision making or your attitude or whatever, that they'll ponder with deep reflection, and at the moment when they need you, at the moment when they go, this is a dad moment, this is a mom moment, they'll give you a call and ask your sage-like advice on where they're at in life. And whether they listen or don't listen is almost immaterial. The important thing is that they value the relationship so much that they would reach out. So that's all the best I could hope for. And I hope that didn't sound like praising moms and then spinning it around to dads, because I'm like, that's all I know. That's what I am. But I value mothers, and I value all the ones I know, and hold them in high esteem for what they do for their children. So, anyway, that's what we got for this week. More news to come. I'll make another video in a week. Until then, we'll be doing some driving and singing videos. And jumping on random streams and working on stories and artwork to hopefully entertain. So that's all I got for this week. I hope you're all doing pure awesome. And again, all the mothers out there, I hope your Mother's Day was an absolute blessing and enjoy. So until next time, this is Odin. We'll see you.